guys, so welcome back to this week's Wake Up CX. So this week we're doing a bit of a physics lesson, but we're applying that lesson to motivation because it's an important topic and I think it's one that's often overlooked and it can lead to so many people being discouraged. Okay, so if you follow advice on LinkedIn, you'll be led to believe if you do step 1, 2, 3, you'll be a millionaire. Do step 1, 2, 3, you get 100,000 followers. And it's set like a recipe. You know, you put in the ingredients, bake it for 20 minutes, bam, you got a nice cake. It doesn't work like that. So we need to add a bit of reality into that. And the best way to drop some reality on a situation is to apply science. So this is why we're going to discuss perpetual motion. So for those that don't know, perpetual motion is the idea that once you apply force to an object, it will continually move forever. Now, this unfortunately is not viable. Okay? If it was, we would never have an energy crisis anywhere in the world, and our fuel bills would not be through the roof because we would have conquered all of that. So, why is it that this doesn't work? It's because if we take the logic of rolling a ball down a street and you're pushing the ball, imagine you're doing it on a flat road, okay? You push that ball and eventually it's going to stop. Where it stops is based on how much force you apply to that ball. So if you give it a little push, it's only going to go a little bit. If you give it a big, huge push, it's going to go further down the road. Now, imagine the same scenario, but this time we're going to do it in a difficult situation, such as going uphill, okay? You give that ball a little push, it's going to roll a little bit, and then it's going to come down and end up behind where you started. Because, you know, every little bit of force is going to get sucked straight out of that ball. Don't believe me? Try walking up a giant steep hill, see how tired you are. And then try walking down the hill and see how much easier it is. Okay? So, if we push the ball up the hill, it's going to go up, and then it's going to come right back down before where we started. And again, if we try and do this downhill, you give the ball just a tiny little push, it's going to go right the way down, it's going to keep rolling. Now, why does it keep rolling when it's going down the hill? Because the decline is allowing it to build up more momentum. So it makes things go much smoother. And it will keep going downhill as long as that decline is there. And then when it levels off, it will eventually stop when the force runs out. So, based on that, what can we say? The tougher the scenario, the more force that needs to be applied. Now, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be Superman and kick this ball up the hill. Eventually, unless that hill stops, the ball's going to come back down again. Doesn't matter who you are. You know, if we're imagining an immortal, everlasting hill here, eventually that ball is going to stop and it's going to shoot right back down, back to where you started. And in reality, for a lot of us, that's what happens. You know, we put so much effort into something and then we start seeing some progress, but eventually it drops, boom, straight back to where we started. And then you get a drop in motivation, you know, why am I bothering, nothing's working, all the rest of it. It's an absolute nightmare. So how do you keep the ball going up the hill? And the reality is, you keep applying force. You know, if you want the ball to keep moving or you want the ball to go further, you apply more and more force. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean we apply all that force at the start and we kick the ball up that hill as far as we can. It might mean that you run alongside that ball and giving it a quick tap as you're going, just so that the ball keeps going to the top. Now, this is basic logic. It's basic science, but it is a reality. If we're struggling, we'll need to apply more force to get to the same distance as someone that is going downhill. They might just tap it, whereas we need to constantly be applying new force. And unfortunately, that is the reality of it. It doesn't matter how much momentum you can build initially, the biggest challenge is sustaining that momentum moving forward. You know, anyone that's gone to a gym will know that. The people that are showing huge progress and great returns in the gym are the guys that go there every week, multiple times a week. They're focusing on every element of it, whether that's the diet, the exercise, mental well-being, the whole lot. It takes more than just a little bit, and they have to keep doing it. If you stop doing it, and if you drop and lose your motivation, all of your great returns will slowly start to fade away. Okay? So that is the reality, and it applies to everything. Whether that's your growth here on LinkedIn, whether that's your success running your contact center, you're managing your team, nothing is set it and forget it. It's the worst thing and the worst advice I've ever heard. Just set it and forget it. And people try and use that like a sales pitch, and it's absolutely disgusting. Once you set something up, you don't need to forget it. You need to remember it. Once you've set it up, you need to review it. It doesn't mean you always need to apply change. If we're considering that ball going along the plane or up the hill, you give it the initial force, that's you setting it all up and it gets going. Then you need to monitor it. Is the ball slowing down? Is the ball starting to come backwards? When it does, that's when you act. That's your trigger point, to give it another nudge up the hill. You don't just forget it, otherwise that ball's going to go up and then come right back behind where you started. That's what happens if you set it and forget it. Staying vigilant and keeping on top of things is the most important thing, and it applies to everything. One of the big things that I've been looking at lately is ICO infractions and enforcement. Huge amount of them going on this last quarter. And one of the biggest things is businesses that set up their contact centers and their businesses around doing outreach. And they thought they put everything in place day one. But then they got fined. So why did they get fined? They got fined because they put all these things in place in day one. They did all the training. They taught all the guys about compliance. And then they ignored the situation. They thought that just giving them the initial knowledge on compliance was going to solve all their problems. They didn't think to do refresher courses. They didn't think to do spot checks. They didn't think to challenge their teams and review the process. They didn't keep up to date on the changes in compliance. And they let complacency slip in. So any money they made, the ICO is just taken right back out of their pocket. And now they've got a bad reputation to boot. So they've ended up before where they started. Whereas if they stayed on top of that, when it came to an ICO review, if something did go wrong, the ICO is going to look at them and go, you've got great processes in place. You're reviewing your training. You're staying on top of things. Something slipped through the cracks. Let's review that process, see what went wrong and see how we can remedy it. But we're not going to drop this huge financial penalty on you because we already see you going through everything you possibly can to try and prevent these issues from happening. So that's where your continued energy, continued motivation goes. It can be a lifesaver down the road for your business, for you, no matter what the scenario. So I hope today's physics lesson's been useful. Don't get used to them. I don't do a lot of science, but at the very least, I hope the topic is going to sit with your head and give you something to think about. I'd love your opinion, so please drop me a DM or get involved in the comments and share your perspective. And let me know, have you used this type of analogy before to explain motivation in your teams? You have a great weekend.